Hello and welcome to my legislative report. I'm State Representative Mark Gillen of the 128th District in Berks and Lancaster counties. On this month's program, I want to share with you two more interviews I conducted with military veterans who helped defend this country and its freedoms. I had the opportunity recently to visit and interview several veterans who live at the Highlands at Wyomissing Retirement Community. Over the next several months, I'll be sharing those interviews with you on my legislative report. Since I've been in the House of Representatives, I've spent a great deal of time bringing the stories of veterans to the public's attention. Their sacrifices, whether in time of war or peace, are to be remembered and honored. On this program, I was privileged to speak to Leonard DeLong and Donald Van Roden. Leonard DeLong, it's a great delight to have you join me for a few minutes. And when I look at your period of service, you were a Marine from 1943 to 1970. You must have enjoyed something about it to stay so long.
I liked it. I came close to getting out once and going in the Air Force, but when the time came, I couldn't do it.
It wasn't for you?
No, they made a Marine out of me in 1943 in boot camp, and I couldn't give it up. Of course, the rates were hard to get in the Marine Corps. In the Air Force, they were going to give me one right off the bat to come in. I couldn't do it, so I stuck with it.
1943 strikes me as a tough year to be a Marine. Once you got your training, where did you deploy to?
Where did
you go?
I went down to Florida to amphibious tractors, the tanks that go in and out water. And I stayed down there, and then I came up to Camp Lejeune. I came up to Camp Lejeune right after the Marines hit Tarawa. And they threw me in a replacement battalion and sent me overseas. I was 18. I went overseas down through the Panama Canal, the Hawaiian Islands, and I stayed there until I joined the 2nd Marine Division. Then I stayed with the 2nd Marine Division until the end of the war.
Where did you go after Hawaii?
After Hawaii, to Saipan, the invasion on Saipan, and then the invasion on Tinian, and then after that, the invasion to Okinawa. After that, we were loading ship to go to Japan when they dropped the atomic bomb. We were loading ship to go. I seen the beach I was supposed to land at, and they said our intelligence was all bad. The colonel told us, after he showed us the beach, they were waiting for us. We all would have been casualties or that.
Marines took on some extraordinary casualties. Look at even the civilian population in Okinawa was decimated. How did it affect you as a Marine, knowing so many of your comrades had died and were injured during these campaigns?
Well, my biggest problem on Saipan was when I was aboard ship, when the kamikazes were coming after us. That had me scared to death, because we couldn't do anything. Just hope that they didn't hit our ship when they dived into the ships.
When you were moving from island to island, did you come in on an LST?
I was on for Saipan and Tinian, there was LSTs I was on. On Okinawa or APA.
Mm-hmm. What sort of resistance did you encounter upon landing or shortly thereafter?
What kind of?
What sort was the enemy?
Enemy was coming in on Saipan, we had a lot of fire coming on us, coming in there, but the Higgins boat, they were hitting a lot of the Higgins boats that was bringing us in, because I was sitting there with a buddy of mine, he was 18, and it don't look good. He said, no, it doesn't, because we seen Higgins boats coming back that got hit, and we seen blood all over the place on them Higgins boats coming back in. Had us worried.
How many of those that were on the boat or you trained with or served with didn't make it out again?
There were quite a few. I couldn't go into that. You know what I mean? Do you think about that on occasion? I think of it a lot. I do not talk too much about it. I tell them wait until I go and meet my buddies and we'll discuss it then.
Yeah. You mentioned Korea, and probably most people, unless they met you and had a long conversation.
Where I was? You
were in Korea, you were in Vietnam.
Yeah.
A word on Korea.
Korea, I landed at Incheon.
MacArthur's Incheon
I was in
landing.
the frozen reservoir, and I was in the Chinese offensive then. I got 5 battle stars from them, broken into different categories. I also served with the Korean Marine Corps there, or platoon did.
MacArthur's going into Incheon, and things look bleak up until that point.
Because of the tide. The tide had us worried of getting in there, but we had no problem.
There's a very narrow window to make the landing, to get in.
Yeah, we got in fairly good.
Did you actually enter the city of Seoul, South Korea?
Yeah. Yep, I was in South Korea, Seoul, when we were in there when MacArthur turned the capital back over to Syngman Rhee, but they ran the Marines out because we were pretty rough. We were rough.
Are you saying that they didn't want you around the civilian population?
No, we weren't around. They put us out, and the Army came out in uniforms with white helmets, and they turned the city over. They run us out.
We hear much about the fighting around the reservoir. We hear a lot about frostbite. You hear a lot about the elements. What's still in your mind about the Chosin Reservoir?
Well, we didn't figure we were going to get out, but we had to fight our way out.
Because you were surrounded.
It was easier to fight our way out. No, it was easier to go up to the river, the old river, than it was to fight our way out, because the Chinese got in back of us and had us trapped. But we fought our way out and got down Ham Hong, and then we ended up down at Wonsan. That is where they evacuated us out of then.
How quickly did you realize that you're surrounded by the Chinese communists, not North Koreans? At what point did you realize, and what's the conversation in the ranks that we're now fighting the Chinese?
Well, we knew what the Chinese had. We knew they had bodies. They had a big army and everything, and we didn't know what to think. But we deep in our hearts, we knew we couldn't hold off the Chinese.
Numerically, there were so many of them.
Yeah, there were too many.
And Chairman Mao had said, destroy the Marines.
Yep.
So you were at risk. But you didn't give up hope, and you fought your way out?
We did. We did.
But there were enormous casualties in getting out.
Oh, we had a lot of casualties. We had put the dead in the trucks and brought all of our dead out with us that we could. But the ones of us that didn't get frozen, we were lucky. At least we thought we didn't get frozen. We could have been and never knew it.
Did you feel like you were well equipped for those kind of conditions?
Well, yes, we got winter gear. We got winter gear before we got up to the north. But when we first entered in there, we weren't actually prepared for it. But the winter clothes got to us, and we were all right. We could only stand about an hour on watch, and then we have to come off
to get warmed up again. Now, we've read historical accounts that the Chinese weren't nearly as well equipped and that they coveted American uniforms and equipment to steal for themselves, whether unfortunately off a dead body or otherwise. And I don't know what you've heard or looked back and read about relative to the Chinese taking American equipment.
All I know is that we were supposed to be home for Thanksgiving, but we didn't get home that year for Thanksgiving. Because I wrote to my father and I said about all the Chinese up on the river, the old river there. If they come across, we ain't going to be home. And they came across.
Now, let's fast forward in the couple minutes that we have left here. Your service took you all the way into Vietnam. And a curiosity question. I'm guessing there weren't that many Marines serving in Vietnam who had also been in World War II and Korea.
Yeah.
How were you viewed as a Marine entering your third major war? Your comrades looked at you and they said, Leonard, World War II, Korea, here we go, Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam was a different war. Because I served in the South there for a while, down Chu Lai. Served down there. Didn't do too much. I got attached to the Korean Marine Corps again. I did more on my second tour. No, half of my tour was down there, and they had to bus us up. They had to take all the staff and the officers and split them up. And they sent me up to 7th Engineers, and I took over Gunny Sergeant of 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. A Company, 7th Engineer Battalion. And I was supervising mine sweeps up there. We had to keep the main supply line open to get our stuff back and forth.
It was tough to identify the enemy in Vietnam.
Yes, it was.
The Viet Cong, you had irregulars not dressed in uniform. Did that cause mounting tension, tougher to identify who the enemy is, suspicion of civilian population? It's a different war.
It was. My roughest, I would say, was World War II, then Korea, then Vietnam. That's the way I line them up. And then I can go back and say at certain phases in the North Korean was the roughest. But then I have to go back World War II. The Japs had a little bit more to throw at us than the Chinese and North Korean.
Well, we are honored and privileged to have spent time with you, Leonard, and your distinguished career stretching from the Second World War into Korea and Vietnam is an inspiration to all Americans. Thank you. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you.
Mr. Van Roden, thanks so much for joining us today for a brief interview. You served in the European theater, and as I came midstream in a conversation you were having with a friend here, you talked about working to expel the Nazis out of Holland. Can we pick that story up again? What were you doing? How long were you there? What did you see?
Well, let me first start by, well, I can't give you the dates. We as a company, or as a really, were sent over there not knowing what would be connected with. And while we sent parts of our group out to help out in France, we really weren't assigned until the time we got our first real assignment, was to get up to Holland, and there's a piece of land north of the port of Antwerp in Holland that was critical to the United States being able to land more people into Europe.
Harbor City.
Yeah.
It makes the interior accessible.
And it was critical that be done. And while I think there were other efforts tried, they finally took a rookie group, which we were, up there. And I can't give you dates, but I can say that in relatively short time, we were able to clear access to the port of Antwerp, and therefore allow a lot of our troops to come in from the United States directly to the port of Antwerp. And that certainly helped to build the front of the United States in the effort to try and clear the Nazis out of that section of Europe.
Little frame of reference, we had June 6, 1944, D-Day, and now we begin our sweep into occupied Europe. Battle of the Bulge, December, January of 45. What are your frames of reference on some of those major events that were taking place? Where were you? Was there optimism in the air that the Germans were going to be defeated and it was going to be in a relatively short period of time?
Well, we really hadn't invaded Germany.
Not yet, no.
No. So this was our first experience entering Germany, and it was very near was it Aachen? Was the town close to the German border, and had been occupied by, I think, the 1st Division before we came in and relieved them, and met the enemy there too. We had met them over in Holland, but we met them in Germany.
What's your position relative to the fighting? What exactly are you doing? What are you hearing and seeing?
I spent my time in the 104th Infantry Division, but I was back in the artillery. The artillery. Mm-hmm. And we fought our way across parts of Germany that had, I think, at least 2 rivers that we had to get across, heading for the Rhine.
Are you going across bridges, or is the Army Corps of Engineers restoring something for you to traverse across?
Well, we were getting across these rivers. There were 2 or 3 rivers, relatively small rivers, that we had to get across in order to get towards our objective, which was the Rhine River. And we succeeded in doing that. I can't give you the amount of time it took.
Did you encounter pockets of resistance? They're retreating. POWs. What are you seeing, smelling, hearing during this period of time with the approach to and onto German soil?
as I say, our target was Cologne on the Rhine River, a sizable city, and as I recall it, practically the only thing that still lived in Cologne was the cathedral, which of course was a real treasure.
Did you encounter pockets of resistance? They're retreating. POWs. What are you seeing, smelling, hearing during this period of time with the approach to and onto German soil?
Because we were now on German land, and because our real objective was to get across the Rhine River. And that's a sizable river, and would be very difficult to fight your way across that big river. And of course, it ran right outside the city of Cologne.
Contact with the enemy?
Yes.
Well, what was that like?
Well, they were across the river. We were on the one side, they were on the other.
But they're shooting back.
Yeah.
They have artillery, they have mortars,
yeah.
right?
But they were not that well equipped, and perhaps were not knowledgeable of our participation in that part of Germany.
What's your vantage point? Are you fearful for your life? What's your proximity to this barrage going back and forth?
Well, being in the artillery and being in the large artillery, I should say.
So it's firing some distance behind the line.
So we had some distance. We
Right.
weren't kind of head to head with them. At least I wasn't in our battery of.
Do you later figure how effective you were? Now, you've done your artillery firing, and now you're advancing.
Yeah. Well,
did you look and say, we found our mark here?
Yeah, we found our mark there, and now our total objective here as a division, which we are, was to get across the Rhine River. And we knew it was, to get across, we needed to get further down the river, and I can't recall the city in Germany that we're heading for, but we knew there was a bridge. We knew there was a bridge across the Rhine River. Now, you know, the Germans had tried to get rid of all.
Blow the bridges up.
By the time our artillery that I was in got to the Rhine River, the Germans had successfully demolished the bridge across the Rhine River. By that time, the infantry had gotten across. So we had invaded Germany from the Rhine River towards the east. When I personally, in the artillery, by the time we got there to cross the Rhine, the bridge was now could not be used. It was either demolished or unserviceable. But we had our pontoon bridges or pontoon equipment there to get us across on pontoons, and we did. We worked as a unit there in trying to get our infantry moving ahead, and we supported them with our artillery. And we went through various towns across there, and one I'll never forget it. They had a concentration camp within the town, and while the infantry was ahead of us, I got our artillery did see this camp there in which the Germans had basically executed or wiped out many of the people who were in that concentration camp.
Described it as a concentration camp versus a prison. What made you call it a concentration camp?
I think that was a term, and I could be wrong about that, that was put in to try to distinguish it from a prison that the Germans might have. As it turned out, there were some Germans. If you have ever been to a lumber yard, you will know how the lumber is stacked on shelves, shelves in the camp itself. This became the refuge for bodies of all different nationalities, of course, including the U.S., stacked up in this concentration camp.
And this is something you were an eyewitness to. Hmm? You saw this personally.
Yes.
What's your reaction to seeing this crime against humanity?
It was horrible, and we interviewed some Germans who were living outside the camp and in the city, and they claimed not to know anything about that.
Did you believe them?
Hard to.
Let's wind down here and finish with your closing in on the heart of Germany. The Russians are approaching from the other side. Were you aware? Were you aware that the pincer was in place and the war was coming to a conclusion in Europe?
Yes. We felt that once we crossed the Rhine River, we felt we were in command.
And in many places, resistance was crumbling. I'm not saying it wasn't hard fought, not saying it wasn't bloody.
You're absolutely right.
But the Germans are on the retreat.
On the retreat, that's correct.
Did you come into contact with any German soldiers, any intersections?
Well, we came in contact with a lot of the prisoners.
Okay.
Now, they were multinational. They were just captured by the Germans, and obviously they were an enemy. And they were either killed right there, or they were imprisoned.
Where were you at when you heard the war was over in Europe?
I really couldn't give you a direct, accurate answer to that, but
do you remember the moment?
I would think after we hit that camp, and to the time when it was surrendered, it was probably 2 to 3 or 4 weeks, I don't know.
You saw a concentration camp. You experienced something atrocious. Is that something that bubbles to the surface of your mind?
It's there and always will be there, and it was a horrible experience. And there were a lot of us who saw, here we are with these terribly decimated people. And they were only kept alive to do the work that the Germans wanted done. But they were slaves, really. And it was just horrible to see and be a part of.
Well, Mr. Van Roden, thank you so much for sharing your experience and liberating a people and a continent and really a globe, ridding them of Nazism. And I know some of it was probably hard to share, but we're grateful that you took the time to do it. That's all the time we have for this program. I'm State Representative Mark Gillen. Please remember to thank the veterans you know or come to meet, as well as those who are currently active in the military. If you have any questions about state government matters, please contact me at my district office. That information will be on your screen in a moment. Thanks for watching, and join me next month for another conversation with our local veterans on Legislative Report.